back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be playing in your commander decks. This is going to be part 1 because I'm probably going to be doing a lot of these. I'm actually going through every card available in Commander alphabetically and finding the ones that I think people should be playing in their decks. I'm putting some of these in my decks, but a lot of my decks don't fit some of these cards, so these are suggestions that maybe will be helpful to you. So starting out, Anzarin Runes. This is a very interesting card. You know, you choose a creature type and then those creatures don't untap. You really can just use this card as a, you know, you pay 4 mana and you tap down someone's commander, you know, permanently. Not permanently, but, you know, for quite some time until they can solve that problem. I mean, that if you want to use it like that, you can. And it's not an aura, right? So it's going to stay on the battlefield. So if you name someone's commander and Anzarin Rune stays on the battlefield, if their commander dies, this stays there. And then when they play it again, it still is under that effect. So it's going to stay there until they remove the enchantment. So it's better than, say, a prison type effect that's going to go away as soon as their commander dies. But then, of course, against a tribal deck, this is just complete hosing, right? Against the Krenko deck, this is pretty much game over. They're screwed. Moving on, number 2, Berserk. This is a card that was, oh man, it might have even been banned for a while because, you know, it's one of those cards that when they made it, they didn't think someone could use this against somebody else's creatures. They just assumed you'd only use it on your own creature. So it became 1 mana, destroy target creature, essentially, right? Fantastic card. You know, I have this in my Shanna deck, I believe, because, you know, sometimes just giving my Shanna trample is worth it. The dying is okay. But what's best about this card is you can use it on your opponents. And in a 4-player game, your opponent swings at one of your other opponents. You pay 1, give that creature a huge boost. One opponent takes more damage and the other opponent loses their creature. That's a double whammy for you, right? Really great, really underplayed card. I almost never see it in EDH games. Bloodsworn Steward, coming in number 3. Man, wow, nobody plays this card. I never see it. In a Tana deck, it's an auto-include. There's a lot of decks that this should be an auto-include. Any deck, and there's a lot where you want your commander to either be attacking or just tapping. So, you know, any of those new commanders, Gen, Obeka, right? You want this card because it's going to be giving your commander haste so you can tap it right away. Coming in number 4, Cabal Conditioning. This is kind of a funny one. I honestly never saw this card until I started doing this search, and at first it doesn't look great. I mean, it costs 7, that's a lot. But essentially, I mean, any number of target players each discard a number of cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. So any number of target players is your opponents. You just pick all your opponents, right? So you pick all 3 of your opponents, and all 3 of your opponents basically are going to discard their hand. You know, I used to have a Damia deck, and my Damia deck was basically just making everyone discard their hands, and then you still get to draw 7 on your upkeep. It was a nasty deck, so I took it apart, but this would be perfect in that deck. I mean, Damia costs 7, so you're guaranteed to get, you know, your highest CMC is going to be 7. I mean, I suppose there's always a situation where they can respond and kill your Damia, but you're going to have something. You're going to have a 4-drop or a 5-drop, so all your opponents are going to discard like 4 or 5 cards, maybe 6, maybe more, right? Cannibalize. I really like this card. 2 mana to exile a creature. That's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, you have to choose 2 creatures controlled by the same player. So you pick 2 of your opponent's creatures, and you exile the one that you really badly want to get rid of, like Avacyn, and you put 2/+1 counters on, you know, his Soul Warden or something that doesn't matter. The really cool thing about this, though, is that it is versatile. I love cards that are versatile. You can use this to exile your own token and put 2/+1/+1 counters on your creature that you want to pump up. If you have a black Tana deck, I had this in a Tana deck that also had black, and I think this is good in that deck because you just exile one of your tokens and then put 2/+1/+1 counters on your Tana. Now she becomes a 4/4 with trample, right? It's just a very versatile card. I also have it in my Volroth deck because I want to put counters on my opponent's creatures so I can copy them. So I'll exile one of my opponent's creatures and then put counters on the one that I want to copy. Just a really interesting, versatile card. Caustic Wasps. Again, another card that is just I never see. Just any deck where you want to be attacking a lot, any deck. I mean, you can just put this in any deck. It's just going to sit there and attack every turn and destroy all your opponent's artifacts. You know, it's just, I mean, I see Trigon Predator a little bit more. Don't see that card much either, really, to be honest. But this is just another version of that. And artifacts are most likely always going to be way more common than enchantments. So this is just almost just as good. Carrionette, a very funny, interesting card that I cracked open in a pack of when I first started playing. I started playing in Tempest, and this is one of the cards that I opened up, and I had to read it like 8 times because I was new at the game and I didn't get it. This is one of those cards, sort of like Bridge from Below, that does literally nothing when it's in play. I mean, it's a 1/1, so I guess it does something, but its ability only works when it's in the graveyard. And it's just a funny card. If you have any kind of deck like I have, I put this in my Nimrus deck because Nimrus is looking at the top 2 cards and then putting one in the graveyard. So you have any deck where you want to be putting creatures into the graveyard, or you can be any sort of mill deck, maybe a Sidisi deck. This is great. It just sits in your graveyard. It does nothing, and then, you know, on a moment's notice, you wait till your opponents are tapped down, and then you just pay the 4 and exile their best creature, right? It's sort of like a gotcha, comes out of nowhere card. And the other interesting thing about it is just like Mangara of Karandor, the exile Carrionette effect is the resolution, not the cost. So you can pay the 4 mana again and again and again. So if you really want to exile something and they have 2 mana up, you can pay the 4 mana, respond, then pay again. Another thing you can do is return it to your hand. If you have some sort of effect where you can return creatures to your hand from your graveyard at instant speed. So for example, if you have Tortured Existence, right, you pay the 4 mana and then you respond. So the trigger goes on the stack, you respond by returning it to your hand, and then when it resolves, you know, just like with Mangara, when you blink them, it exiles, but since it's not in the graveyard anymore, it's no longer there, it's not going to exile, it's just going to exile the other creature, and the Carrionette's going to be in your hand. So pretty neat card. Some silly little things you can do with it. Next up, Carrion. This is a card I just did my deck tech for my Elves deck, my Nadir and Miara deck that this is in. Just a great card in any sort of an Aristocrats deck where you want to be sacrificing creatures. You just sacrifice a big creature, make lots of tokens so you can then sacrifice them. Next up, Chlorophant. This is a great card in any +1/+1 counters deck. You know, there's a lot more commanders in that space. Hamza comes to mind from the new set. This is great in a Hamza deck. Just put it there. It's putting counters on itself every single turn, making your Hamza cheaper. I mean, it just seems great in a deck, in any of those kinds of decks. And obviously, if you have Threshold, it's even better. And finally, Curfew. Love this card. It's another card that I never see that I think is really, really useful. It is, you know, first of all, it's fantastic against a Voltron deck. Any Voltron deck, you know, assuming they have 1 creature in play, there's no way around this, right? Everyone has to return a creature to their hand. There's no way to get around it. So if you only have 1 creature in play, you're returning that creature in play to your hand. Doesn't matter if it's indestructible, hexproof, doesn't matter. It's going back to your hand no matter what. There's no way around this. The added bonus is that you return one of your creatures to your hand that you want to have to your hand, right? So you have a Spell Seeker in play, you curfew, everyone has to return a creature to play, and then you get to put your Spell Seeker back in your hand and then play it again. So it's a really neat card. I mean, it only costs 1, it's an instant. It's a good card to save your life. This card can save your life, and also it can save a creature if you want to just save a creature from a board wipe that you have. And it's also a great way to reuse a creature that has an ETB or something, right? So yeah, that's it for today. Those are my 10 cards that you should be putting in your commander decks. Like I said, I'm going to be making a lot more of these, so thanks for tuning in.